Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. Y'all, what's today? Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. I am seated outside and it is just a beautiful, beautiful day. I'm looking at the flowers and the trees and water. There's something, I was thinking about this yesterday. So today we're going to be talking about the benefits of joy and happiness. I've never loved that word happiness because it felt ungrounded. It felt as though something flighty. Honestly, it felt, what's the right word for it? It's funny. I actually, when I think of happiness, I have a similar thought as I do surrounding like vanity, where growing up, this is so interesting. So here, let's do the work. Why have I had an aversion to happiness? So if I sit with the sensation that I feel in my stomach right now. So guys, just so you guys know, and I've had a couple different presentations and podcasts today. So this is my last one of the day. And I'm so happy to be here with y'all because we've had in these different groups, I did obviously our show this morning. I did a mastermind talk today. And then I did a podcast recording. And then we're here again going live. And in every single conversation, there's just so many like kind of revelations, I guess you could say, in the processing, in sharing and communicating with other people, hearing what they've learned and being able to share our own experiences. There's so much that we come to learn simply by way of processing out loud. And one of the best things that I've learned that has really made an impact on my life is how to do that processing alone. Because for so long as we're waiting until we have other people with us, it stunts our growth. It stunts our ability to be able to process in real time what is coming up for us. And so one of the things I talked about very, very briefly in the mastermind call, and frankly, I think that it warrants its own show, is this concept of the state of being. And it has to do, there's a 3-part process to it. And I learned being a couple years ago, and actually I learned it from my puppy, Zeus. I'll always remember this moment. I distinctly remember it. He was running around the backyard, chasing bees and trying to catch them in his mouth. Don't advise that. And I was actually in therapy that afternoon. And I was sitting in the backyard and my therapist looked at me and he was like, Christine, I think you need to learn how to be. And I like picked up my pencil and I was like, okay, what are the 3 to 5 steps of being? And he was like, you're missing the whole point. And he never actually said what it was. So I was like, well, that's not helpful. You just telling me I need to learn something, then not telling me how to learn it. But it kind of piqued my curiosity. And over the next couple of weeks, I actually started just leaving my phone behind when I would take my puppy on walks. And I wouldn't be listening to podcasts, to music, to books, to anything. I was solely in the moment. And that was actually during the time where my husband had moved out and he had told me, I don't love you. I don't love God. I don't love your family. And so he was like, but let me think about whether I want to get a divorce or not. So we were in this weird limbo where after someone says something like that, I was like, I'm pretty sure he's not going to come back around, but I'll wait and kind of keep hope. And so I was in this time of just really, like, I liken it to the wilderness. It was just so devastating. And, the mornings were terrible. You wish that it was all a dream because you're in this weird limbo of like watching your life fall apart rather than like him being like, oh, I'm done. I'm gone. It was, I'm pretty sure I'm done and gone, but just hold on a minute. Let me just make 100% sure I really want to be done and gone with you. So sitting and waiting, it produced a lot of time to think and process or a lot of time to distract and suppress. And I had seen what happens on the other side of suppression. My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, they had been married for 4.5 years, and had a 3-week-old baby girl. And he was hit from I guess the front head-on collision by a drunk driver on the interstate in Houston and died instantly. And, there's something around when you suppress all of the grief around that, it doesn't stay quiet. It expresses itself in different ways. And what I specifically saw, not just for myself in not healing from that, but his cousin, his cousin had lost his sister 12 years before that. So then when my brother-in-law was killed, that cousin couldn't even come to the funeral because there was so much pent up and so much that had been suppressed that it's like, at that point, 12 years later, you don't know what's going to come out. You don't know what's going to happen. It's literally like a ticking time bomb emotionally. And so I had watched that happen. I had also experienced my own, because by the time my husband was in this waffling period, I knew what had happened inside of me by suppressing my grief over losing my brother-in-law all those years. And I was like, I'm on the pathway to that around grief, I'm on the pathway to where my brother-in-law's cousin was at. But I just saw in my mind's eye, okay, if that's who I could become if I suppress grief, but what happens if I suppress it around my husband at the time, if he does end up leaving? And I just saw in my mind's eye, like, who I would become. And it was just this bitter, cynical woman who was playing the victim for her whole life. So I made a commitment. Once my husband said those words to me, we were in a parking lot, I think at like IHOP or some Denny's or someplace. And I made a commitment that I wouldn't not feel the pain. And so in the commitment to then feel the pain, it just opened up this whole, I guess you could say, can of worms, because there was a lot of grief that had been suppressed over those 8 years of being married and then losing my brother-in-law along the way. And it was just so, so awful. And we're here to talk about grief or joy, not grief. But the reason why that's important is because just like how grief has an impact on our body, our emotions, our spirit, our mind, so does joy. Joy in equal proportion has, and perhaps even in greater proportion, has an impact on every part of us. And here on the Knowing Show, we talk about the intelligences of what makes us a human being. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But back to this state of being, before we continue on, I learned in being in the moment, in feeling the pain, and allowing myself to sit with what was coming up, that actually was an aspect of being present, of being, truly being, is to feel, is to sense the emotions that are coming up, rather than run away from it, rather than try to move into the future, rather than ignoring the past. It's in order to really be fully present, it actually means that we have to be willing to experience whatever it is that is in that moment. And in that moment, if it's grief, moving through that, if it's joy, embracing that. Because here's the thing, if we're not willing to be vulnerable, we're going to avoid grief, and we're also going to avoid joy. Joy is actually perhaps the most vulnerable thing, because who knows what could happen if we're really at the height of joy. That there's a long ways to fall, rather than just staying neutral, staying emotionless. But what if I was to really, really allow myself to feel both ends of the spectrum? What could potentially come forth? What kind of life could I live if I'm willing and allowing myself to experience both ends of the spectrum? And so to that point being, there were 3 steps to that for me that really came to light during that time. And it was, 1, slowing down. Just if I sense something emotionally rising up, I need to just stop, pause, slow all the way down. That's number 1. Number 2, lean into it. What is coming up for me emotionally, and what data does it have? This is why it's emotional intelligence. We talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about data intelligence, but our emotions have data. It stores information in our being, in our body. Our physical intelligence, there is data in every single facet of the human being. The spirit, the mind, the soul, the physical body stores data. And the goal is to become intelligent of it, to know what does it look like for me to be in health, and what does it look like for me to be unhealthy, and then know how to move in and out of that. Man, that's freedom in so many ways, to not have any one of those parts of us master us, but to have you and me as we were created to be by God in the driver's seat of our lives. And so slowing down, Number 2, leaning into whatever the data that emotion is producing. And then 3, asking why, really understanding why is that emotion there. And there's benefits to this, again, in terms of understanding, knowing, hence the knowing show, knowing why, knowing what's inside. Then afterwards, we get to basically be free from it. We get to choose, do I want to stay in this state, in this particular frame of grief, or do I want to stay in this onslaught of pain of the past, or do I want to get free from it? And that is actually a really real choice that we have to consider. Before we can even begin the conversation around joy, do you actually want joy? Do you want to experience joy? There's a comfort in the grief. There's a comfort in the chaos. There's a comfort in the known suffering of misery. It's actually far more uncomfortable to try to move out of a state that we've been in because we don't know what it's going to be like. Hence why joy is so vulnerable, because somebody else could come in and ruin our joy unless we know how to actually self-perpetuate joy, how to cause our own joy, how to conjure it up for ourselves. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before I begin, I'm just jumping here into the chat. Hello, my friends. Man in the Hat, Wayne, I'm so glad to see you. Happiness is temporary, momentary. DJ, Arch Nemesis, I'm so glad to see you. Happiness is a lie that we convince ourselves can happen, when in reality we are not worthy of it. Ooh, we're getting real. Bang Top, hello. I'm glad to see you. Tyron, hello. Jingle Jungle, you made it. Hello. I guess I am. Happiness comes with enjoyment. You enjoy something and therefore you have happiness momentarily. It's so funny. I was kind of tracing the root of why I didn't like happiness, and you guys are bringing me back to that. I grew up in such a Christian conservative environment. And y'all, I think that this is actually really important. Does joy matter? Is joy important? Is it something to pursue? And I don't want to use happiness and joy interchangeably, without intention and without kind of first almost agreeing on terms. I've always viewed happiness as something akin to almost like vanity, where it's like you actually shouldn't pursue happiness because it's momentary, it's fleeting, and perhaps even in happiness is vulnerability. And I think that there's also this narrative that as people who love God, we are actually not supposed to experience joy. If we're happy, then are we really suffering for Christ? And that was really a narrative for me growing up, where it wasn't told to me, but I observed it. I listened to it. I saw it modeled, where there was far more comfort in suffering than there was in joy, because at least when I'm suffering, there was kind of a holier, not a holier than thou, but there was, I think, some semblance of security of like, well, I must be doing the right thing because I'm suffering. And so that was kind of my narrative. And I think that that's partially why I have this like aversion to happiness, because of that framing. And so I want to talk tonight about, and so Man in the Hat says joy is important. I need to read it. I'm so excited to read that. Joy versus happiness. We'll stick with joy tonight because joy really, for me, it's always held greater merit. However, as I sat with why do I have this aversion to happiness, I realized that there is, I actually think that there's work that I need to do there, because I think that, kind of like we were talking about this morning and even last night, a branding problem. What does happiness really even mean? And why do we have such a negative connotation to happiness to begin with? And that's just my perspective, where I did grow up with an aversion to it. But joy is something that has been, okay, we can pursue joy. And so I want to talk about it in the aspects. Yeah, Wayne, count it all joy. Literally, yes. So, okay, so let's talk about it from the perspective of the intelligences: intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, physical intelligence, spiritual intelligence. And I actually want to start with spiritual intelligence because we're kind of already talking a little bit about that. Y'all, there's a number of scriptures, and you guys already said one, around joy. And there's also this concept that I think when I actually have traced the root word and the etymology of the Hebrew or Greek that was used for, at different verses, it wasn't so much to do with suffering per se. It was more so like when you actually read I looked into the word trial, and that word trial is so much deeper than just like when you're having a challenge or when you're suffering. It's more so like that space in time between what you're hoping for and what actually happens. I think of it kind of like the space that Viktor Frankl is talking about between stimulus and response. There's a space, and that space is choice. And that space is what the Greek word means for trial in that verse. So really, the joy is to be found in the space of choice that we make every single day. And going to another verse, Psalm 16:11, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. In your presence, there's fullness of joy. There's these verses that have, the completion of Psalm 16 is, indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. And then the other verse, in your presence is fullness of joy. And so what does joy mean there as opposed to joy from suffering? There must be something deeper. There has to be. God isn't, from what I've experienced, and even watching the example of Jesus, it wasn't some drudge-filled 3 years of ministry. Actually, the very fact that his first miracle was at a wedding where he increased the joy of the room, I think says a lot. I think it says a lot, and people thought, this is what's so interesting. It's very controversial. And so I'm interested to hear what you all have to say. I read this verse about a year ago. It said, the Pharisees thought that Jesus was a drunkard and a sinner. And that stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, okay, well, how was Jesus living if people thought that of him? Yes, he hung out with those people, but maybe he actually really did drink wine and enjoy. Maybe Jesus actually was not so much walking around with this like depressed countenance of holier than thou or something like that led for him to not be able to enjoy those that he engaged with. And so it made me curious. Obviously, we don't know. Yet, as we read about joy throughout the biblical texts, there's a lot there. And the one thing I have asked, the one thing I seek, is to come to be in the presence of God. And those concepts, it's like, okay, well, clearly there must be joy there. And so if we're living a suffering-filled life, are we actually perhaps missing something that otherwise God is longing to give us, which is joy in his presence in so many ways? So I'm curious to hear perspectives there to add to this. Andrew, no, this is real. Hello, real. I guess the recorded video is real, but no, it's not recorded. We're live. Good to see you. I guess, yeah, you say, is this real or fake? This is real. I'm just scrolling back up in the chat. Suffering is the joy. It's the growing. It's the weed that will not die and will persevere through the concrete and live. Okay, so let's keep going. And I want to hear y'all's thoughts on that in terms of the spiritual regard. But there are so many verses that allude to joy that I think that we as in the collective, the way that I was raised, I think that we got it kind of wrong, where it was to take pride and honor in misery rather than man. Oh, Andrew, you are not going to be with us much longer, my friend. We do not talk like that here. I am loading my YouTube to remove you. You're more than welcome to listen, though. One moment, y'all. You need to do away with this. All right, it looks like that was taken away, which is good. Oh my gosh, you know what I wonder? I wonder if I can see things that you guys can't because I'm on Restream. Anyways. Okay. I just hit a friend. Not you, Andrew Valet, someone else. Okay. Back to business. Okay. So the fruit, Andrew, I love that you just said that. What are the fruits of the Spirit? The second one is joy, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness. Faithfulness and self-control. I think that I think you're absolutely right. We always will go through suffering. In fact, very firsthand, I've watched such incredible suffering and experienced some of my own. And you know, it's funny. That's it. That so much in those moments of just deep suffering, I have experienced the presence of God, and therein does lie joy. But how can we experience the presence of God apart from suffering being the conduit to it? How can we experience the presence of God right here, right now, in this conversation, and thus have joy? It is the joy in the presence of God, not the joy from the suffering. The presence of God is the thing that comes in the suffering that then we experience joy. But there's not some masochistic joy to be found in, oh, look, I'm in pain. Instead, it's what happens, I would believe would be the byproduct of that suffering is the encounter of literally the divine heavenly God, our Father, that we get to come to know in an intimate way that otherwise we perhaps may not have ever known. And therein lies joy. So it's perhaps what joy produces. Simone X, hello. We are not AI, but you are welcome to hang out with us. Edoc, hello. God is everything, all the pain and joy. I agree. I love that. And you know what would be, okay, so let's go ahead. We were talking about spiritual intelligence, like the benefit of and how to experience joy in spirit. And it's really through the presence of God, regardless of whatever conduit that gets us into that presence. And ideally, we're self-perpetuating our own experience of the presence of God to thus experience joy and all the other benefits, to your point about the fruit of the Spirit. And so moving on now to comic book fusion. Comic flick fusion. I'm glad to see you. L Dog, hello. Let's keep going. So, okay, intellectual intelligence. Actually, I'm gonna go to that after. Next, going to physical intelligence. So, what happens? And I am so curious. I'm hopeful that Christopher Adams will come back because I know he left yesterday because we were talking about meditation. There's a lot of words that have an associated memory for our own selves or an association in terms of like new age or an association that is Christian or, you know, any kind of association, word association. That's how our brains work. And so much of us doing the work to know the truth is actually stripping away all the associations to come back to the actual genesis of what is the intention of this word. Like intuition, learning that the Latin root of that word is intuere, which means to be led from within, taught from within. That's so cool, right? Now there's so much more meaning to that word intuition, whereas other people may actually have kind of like they've made it sound almost a little bit new agey, like, oh, know yourself, listen to yourself. And it's like, well, no, actually, there's real depth there. What does it mean to be taught? That's the source of true creation. That's us mirroring the greatest creator, and be acting in his image is to be taught from within that we are actually creating something new versus being a carbon copy of everybody else. So if we can, I love this. Words, smell, sounds have associations with my file cabinet memories. I love that. Oh my gosh, DJ, yes. And so to talk about these things right here, right now, I'm talking about physical intelligence and how our body, the way our mind works. The reason why we were talking about meditation yesterday is because Literally, our body has the opportunity to self-soothe and self-regulate, but we've never learned the body in school. We've never learned emotions in school, and we've only ever cultivated the mind. And so, if we want to become a holistic, healthy human being, we actually do need to learn the body. We do need to learn our emotions. We need to learn we need to learn our spirit. We need to work on these intelligences and the cultivation of them so that we're actually able to be in the driver's seat of our life and operate at our fullest capacity to bring the greatest, oh man, it's hard. I'm like getting so excited to make the greatest impact that we possibly can. There's so many reasons why we need to know every single one of these intelligences. It is for the good of the world around us. It's for our own good. It's for the glory of the one who created us. It's for all of these reasons. And joy is the outcome in so many ways. So all that to say, physical intelligence. Our body, there's hormones that can be released. One of those is stress hormones, and it's called cortisol. And that stress hormone kicks into gear. And what that happens is that it actually activates an emotional sensory system effectively, which is called, I think of it as like the 4 Fs, the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And so our physical release of this hormone activates our emotions that causes our cognitive brain to shut down our short-term memory. So it's all so connected. Physical intelligence to emotional intelligence to intelligence. So if we don't understand the progression of like, oh my gosh, cortisol kicks in, it activates my emotions, that turns off a part of my brain. And the way that we fix that is actually going back to the source of the physical. So that physical release of cortisol, deep breathing literally helps to regulate our cortisol and return our short-term memory, and allows for us to actually switch back into the parasympathetic nervous system. I like to think of it kind of as like track 1, track 2. Track 1 is the cortisol, stress hormones, the sympathetic nervous system. All of that is over here. And then over here is the peace and the serotonin. The serotonin counterbalances the cortisol. The parasympathetic counterbalances the sympathetic. And it's the other side that can actually, it's the same thing, physical intelligence, but one physical intelligence is activating the stress. One of them is activating the peace. And knowing how to regulate ourselves, like we actually can choose which nervous system is in control at the moment, at any given moment, which is so cool. I'm just jumping here in the chat. Nonconformist, I'm glad you're here. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I'd love to hear what you think and how you would explain both systems. I love that DJ says, fire the neurons, reconnect the wire on the light switch, and boom, light. Isn't that so true? It really is correcting and reconnecting the wires in so many ways. Just looking through the chat here. Nonconformist, I just saw some of your other comments, so I'm going to go ahead and just excommunicate you, because it doesn't sound like you want to be here, but you can listen anytime. Okay, so coming back to the chat, just looking through here. Oh, the Gray Tone, hello. I'm so glad you're here. Ah, yes, Dion. Oh my gosh, so that you may be complete and sound in all respects, not lacking in anything. I love, 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 love that. And again, that word trial has so much of a deeper meaning than just like a suffering or a challenge. Like it's really, really, really deep, which is so, so, so cool. Smuggy Smuggerson, I like your title. Good to see you. Mike and Mike Denmark, hello, good to see you. The man, the animal, good to see you. Fresh, thank you for hanging out. Lloyd, good to see you. All right. Scrolling down. All right. You're great too. I love y'all. That's so funny. Okay, and y'all just give me a shout out anytime anyone else needs to get off here. Okay, let's go back. So with the cortisol and the serotonin, it's funny. I've just been watching more and more people around my dad's age. My uncle was 61, and I really kind of think that he just wore himself out. Like, truly. And I also think God is so big, and I think it was his time to go. I do believe that. And I think that we all have a responsibility to take care of ourselves, to really honor the physical body. Like, our body is a temple and a vessel and a conduit for so much good, so much meaning in the world, change in so many ways. And so what that does in us, and Jeff, I see your comment, serotonin is overrated. I told my dad, I was like, Dad, you got to live forever, right? I know he's not going to, but I want him to take care of himself, because the higher his cortisol levels are, higher blood rate. He was told by his doctor recently that his heart isn't good. So obviously, what do we need to then change in our lifestyle to ensure that we're operating to take care of this physical? It's a machine in so many ways. Our body is a machine and a temple. So it's sacred and utilitarian. So how do we ensure that we're taking the best and optimal care? We're being intelligent. And yes, our physical being can produce the hormones that allow for joy, that increases and impacts us on an emotional level, but also on a longevity of lifespan for us to continue on in this world, to continue on making the impact and loving well and doing as we should in terms of our mission. And then in terms of the intellectual intelligence, y'all, our short-term memory being turned off by heightened degrees of cortisol is really a big deal. We talk about this concept of walking on eggshells. If we are unstable physically, because it all comes down, it's unstable intellectually, from the emotions, ultimately from our physical body. It returns to the physical. And sometimes I'm like, man, is the physical actually really the nucleus in so many ways? Kind of like what's underneath of the lateral. And for those of you who are frequent here, hopefully you'll catch this. It's like, if we were to line up each intelligence, which one is at the hierarchy? I think, okay, tell me what you guys think about this. In my presentation this morning, I just had this thought of, the spirit is at the pinnacle. That is the ultimate governing superordinate principle. Who am I? What's my mission? What is my why? And then we've got the intellect and the emotions that are the guardrails, informing our relationships, informing how we live in terms of the habits and the behaviors in which we guide our lives. And then perhaps the very foundation is the physical. Because, man, if we're dying, if we're not physically well, we can't do any of the above. So tell me what you guys think about that hierarchy. I really like that bottom. I really like that, the physical being the foundation and the spirit being at the pinnacle of the hierarchy. Jumping back into the chat. All right. DB, hello. I'm glad to see you. All things will be restored. Rock, hello. Good to see you. Let's see. Darren, hello. Good to see you. Cody, hello. What if your fullest capabilities are to be the example of what not to do? Whoa. I will say, I believe every single one of us does have a purpose. And I do believe every single one of us has a unique revelation. And I do think we have the opportunity to choose. It's hard for me to imagine that, like, your fullest capabilities are the example of what not to do. And it's like, who am I to say? But that made me pause and be like, holy crap. Victor, hello. The cortisol memories correlation. I was stunned when I first learned that. And it makes so much sense. It's not just, oh, keep your heart pressure in a good place. It's not just, oh, regulate your blood and your heart and all that good stuff. It's no, it impacts the way that you literally see the world. Your short-term memory gets cut off if your cortisol is high. Hence why we get triggered and return to the past. We think the past is what's happening right now, and it's not. But our body doesn't know that. So the deep breathing brings the regulation and the memory recall, which is so, so cool. I get such a kick out of it. I had the best science teacher in 6th grade. It was all about the human body. And then all my other science teachers were not great after that. So sometimes I wonder, I'm like, would I have pursued science? Andrew says, I remember reading books about the brain. I just bought a book this morning about brain plasticity. That is so over my head, and we'll see what happens. I'd love to know what you learned, Andrew. I love that. The best way to release energy and stress out of your body is to talk to someone, and releases a chemical outer brain. What? What do you mean outer brain? All right. My mind is blown. Also, give me a second. My internet might get a little funky. I'm opening up a Word document to save our chat. Okay, I think I'm back. Oh no. Did I not save it in enough time? Okay, I did. Sometimes after we've been chatting for a while, the chat gets like it disappears. And I like saving the chat so that I can come back and take a gander. Oh, I also set up a filter, and I'm so glad for that. I filtered out words, like bad words and appropriate words. And have you guys seen a difference in the chat? I only did that in the last 2 weeks, and I feel like it's made such a difference. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm realizing that I only see all the bad stuff now. So I'm like, man, I need a filter for me to not see it, because it's crazy. All right. All right. Good. I saved it all. All right. Coming back. Mel, I'm so glad you're here. Comic conclusion. I just saw your ride on emoji. That made me fun. That made me laugh. There is no mission, unfortunately, Jeff says. I beg to differ with you. I really believe it. And I could be wrong, but I feel so strongly that everyone has a purpose and a why. I really do. And I think it's perhaps a matter of time before you realize yours, and maybe you won't. And that's okay too. And I hope you do, because man, the unfolding of the mission is really exciting. So I believe in joy. Okay, yeah. I believe in joy and I experience it, but I'm always told, why aren't you smiling, or why aren't you excited? Like my form of emotion and expression is different from most. I don't like that you've been told that, DJ. I feel like that's nobody's business, your personality. You know? I believe in joy and I experience it, but I'm always told, why aren't you smiling? I would be curious about codependence sometimes can have a correlation like that, like people asking those kinds of questions. I don't know if that's at all accurate in your environment, but that would be curious to consider. The oldest view. No, I don't know what that means. Victor, hello. The gray tone. I like the hierarchy idea. Me too. I'm so glad you brought that back. I need to remember that. Philippians 4:7, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your mental powers by means of Christ Jesus. So having the hierarchy encapsulated by the physical body doing our work, being responsible to manage our own cortisols and serotonins and all that good stuff. Because the thing is, there are foods that will spike both of those too. Drinks, literal depressants will spike those different levels. So one, that's our radical responsibility, and then spirit is absolutely like, it's perhaps bookending our responsibility and Christ. That's so cool. Okay, scrolling down. Health is wealth, Darren says. Darren, 100%. The first and really only time I've been in this room, it was probably like the most successful room by all cultural standards. The number one thing that they talked about was health. And this was 3 years ago. And that really like shocked me into action. Like, wow, health matters. These are the most elite of the elite, at least from that I've experienced. And they're not talking about business. They're not talking about wealth management. They're talking about health and relationships. So this conversation that we're having right now, and the conversations we have in the Knowing show, it's like it happens at some of the highest levels where people reach the pinnacle of success, realize there's no fulfillment, realize that actually their health and their relationships were the very things that they should have been managing all along. And then they try to regain ground that was lost over the 60 plus years that they spent fixated and focused on wealth and finances and things that are fleeting that they're not going to be able to take with them, much less so produce that inner peace and that contentment. Randy, I'm glad to see you. Who was your mentor who guided you? Okay, I didn't have an actual physical mentor, but I did read a couple books. One, the very first book. Well, okay, I gotta say, my parents, if I start talking about them, I'm gonna like get emotional. I will forever be so grateful. There's a decent amount that I've had to undo and unlearn. You know, I grew up with spirit, and I grew up with, they really instilled in me a spiritual appreciation. The emotional intelligence I really had to cultivate for myself. And that's the mentor that I'm about to say. Intellectual intelligence, I really loved the education that I had, and it was actually not at all what most would expect, I suppose. It was this hybrid of like homeschooling and public education, but it wasn't even public, it was private, I guess, because we only went to school 2 days a week. We wore uniforms. We had a very classical education. We did Latin and Greek and debate and logic. It was very, very classical, very rigorous, but at the same time, we weren't in school the other 3 days of the week. So it really was a very interesting hybrid. I would love to actually start one of these schools and potentially have them across the country. I like have a dream of doing that. I'll need funding for sure. And I'd love to do that because it really produced a really beautiful integration of independence with autonomy, so like independence, autonomy with being like covered in the arts. You know, we actually, to be honest, science and math were kind of weak, but really it was the cultivation of the mind in so many ways, critical thinking and reasoning and understanding in that regard. So I would say the intellectual intelligence was childhood, very much so. Spiritual intelligence, my parents, and then emotional intelligence. So the very first book I ever read, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that made me want to start a business. I learned about the Enneagram. And the Enneagram was actually really cool because it was so much more to do so about what motivates you. And so thinking about our core motivations, I had never once thought about what does motivate me, what matters to me. Never once. It was only ever me looking outward, never once looking inward and taking responsibility for who I am, how I am, why I am. Never once asked those questions. And so in starting my business in 2019, starting to be interested in the Enneagram, and then, honestly, it was when my husband first thought about leaving that really forced me to like lean in on kind of, okay, how do I actually start asking good questions and really get to know people? And I kind of made him a study for him to get to know himself, and hopefully he would decide to stay with me. And then when he officially left, I read Brene Brown, Daring Greatly, and I started therapy. And that was really huge for me. So Brene Brown's Daring Greatly, I don't know where she is today in terms of like, God only knows people's political views. So when I reference someone, it's purely like that book and that isolated experience. So Daring Greatly was the very first time that I realized, oh, emotions are actually, 50% of the right hemisphere of the brain. You've got the intellect and you've got the emotions in terms of the hemispheres. And so I realized, oh, if I shut down my emotions, if I suppress them like I have most of my life, then I'm fundamentally eliminating myself from 50% of the human experience. And how then can I ever have a real relationship with somebody if I am fundamentally not known and I'm not a cultivated human? So that was huge for me. So Daring Greatly, Brene Brown. Business books have been impactful to me. Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Gary Keller, I forgot his name earlier today on the podcast. Gary Keller, Jay Papasan, The One Thing, that was huge. Gap in the Gain. Benjamin Hardy, Dan Sullivan. That's a really, really, really good book. Both of those are business. 10x is better than 2x. That's another Dan Sullivan book. I read some of The Power of Now, but only like in the last year or two, and it was more so confirmation rather than teaching. David Hawkins, man, Letting Go. That was so good. And I'm catching up on emails. So DJ, I think you said that I can send that book to you. So I've got to follow up with you and send you that book. Also, am I super delayed, y'all? Am I present and accounted for? So those are a few books that I would say kind of those mentors, I suppose, that made a big impact for me. And I'd love to hear what are books that have been impactful for you guys. What's been meaningful for you. But those have had a real impact for me. All right, going back into the chat. I'm frozen. Oh, well, I can't see anything. I guess this is our time to call it to an end, perhaps. Whenever the chat stops working, I'm like, well, maybe that's my sign. Oh, wait, we're back. We're back in action. DJ says, was your husband older or younger? He was 3 years older. I just saw some comments that made me laugh. YB, hello. Good to see you. Victor, how can someone say they love you and then leave you? They don't know what love even is. I had to really sit with that. I felt very disillusioned on love. Which, frankly, in me actually kind of realizing that there are 7 different types of love, that actually brought a lot of, that was really, really helpful. That in the Greek form of love, there's 7 different meanings. And so when someone says, I love you, it's like, okay, well, which one is it? And that's actually really, really important. If we're not aware of what those mean and the words that we're even speaking, what does love mean? I was hosting a retreat. I was hosting a retreat with a couple couples. And I asked them all, I was like, what's your definition of love? And each one had a different answer. Not just each couple had a different answer, but each person in the couple had a different answer. Oh man, I pinned this. Look what I did. Oh, that's so funny. I didn't mean to pin that. That's so funny. Well, it proves I'm not sitting here looking at myself, right? That's so funny. I don't know how long that was there. Oh my. I think it's really important that the defining terms, and DJ, I've been really grateful for you because you've called me out a couple times, but it's like, wait, what do you mean by that? And it's been important. It's been so important because we all, in order for us, and actually Jordan Peterson and I think Sam Altman would have these like 3-hour debates, and they would start the next day restating each other's argument to ensure we're on the same page. Because apart from definitions of terms and effectively being on the same lateral plane, I'm starting off from plane A and you're starting off from plane B, and therefore when we come and contend, we're completely missing each other. And so if we want to ever have effectual contention, and contention isn't bad, but if we ever want to have effectual contention where we have a real outcome, we have to define terms and always start there. And so DJ, I've been grateful in the past where you had that and you kind of challenged me in that regard. Milan, good to see you. Looking through here, I feel like you're kind of, there's some spam happening here, Milano. So I'm gonna go ahead and hide you unless you stop. So I would love for you to keep chatting with us. I'm happy you're here, but we'll need you to stop spamming. Uh-oh. I did something. Okay. Wow. DJ, I hate that. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. How long ago was that? Wow. Yeah, semantics. It's so true. It's so true. I just, man, that is so incredibly painful, you know? Love is not jealous, it does not brag. Love is caring for people as a living person, nothing more. Quad, thanks for joining. Good to see you. Robert, thanks for popping in. Smuggy Smuggerson, good to see you. I know you were in here earlier, but still not AI. DJ, I'm curious, have you? I know you said you're still trying to get over that. What if it wasn't so much a getting over, but rather a moving through it? Like, I don't know, man. I really grieved my former husband, like really, truly. So I think I might have missed it. When did it happen? What was the year? Because even if it's been 10 years, I just think that unless we really move through the pain and the grief there, and it still comes up. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I literally cried on the live. And so I think that it's still there and it always will be. And it doesn't have to have power over us, but I don't think until we actually move through the grief, I don't think that we can heal to the same extent. 10 years. So have you ever fully grieved it? And maybe you have. And I just think that that's so important. And knowing you from how I know you, same with so many of you, Wayne, Man in the Hat, and so many others. Like, it's been such a privilege to know y'all to the extent that we do. And I hope for every single one of you that there's love in the relational sense, in the romantic sense, because there is something really healing in that. And still, I don't know if we can actually be prepared to receive that until we have actually done the healing work ourselves to the extent that we can. I actually think that relationship adds a whole layer of healing because it actually ends up triggering a lot more wounds than we thought we already had healed from. That was my experience with my darling. I actually thought I had healed as much as I possibly could have from my husband. And then when I got in a relationship with him, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was there. and that was there, and that was there, only because I was never triggered. It was never activated from the past pain. So, Wayne, I love that. Love is handcuffs and blindfolds. Oh no, 363 English. So you know what? I gotta say, I'm really sorry for whatever you've experienced that leads to that. I think that so often we do speak from experience, and if experience has caused that level of pain, it's really devastating, in so many ways. So I'm so sorry. Dion, love does not rejoice over unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. A man in the hat. I'm so glad that I think that, as you're talking about emotional love, could a parent have an emotional love for a child and not be codependent? Or is emotions in concert with love always going to be codependent? I'm just curious how you think about that. Was my first relationship also kind of crazy, almost storybookish. DJ, oh my gosh, I wonder, oh man, would you ever be willing, or would you ever want to write a book? Because I could see that being so cathartic, even just for your sake. I've written 4 or 5 versions of my book, and it's brought so much clarity around what I believe, what I value. Comic Book Fusion, you actually asked me about mentors. I actually think that writing was the most potent manner in which I came clear on who I am, what I believe, what I value, and why. I don't know if people telling you things are never going to be as impactful as us experiencing a thing. And so through writing, we're kind of forced to go into these areas that we otherwise would have never gone. And we're forced to contend with our own selves in a way that otherwise, I don't know if we would be forced to contend with. Franzi, Phi, you know what? I'm so glad you brought up the Jordan Peterson thing. Every time I've brought up Jordan Peterson over the last few months, I have said, I like Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. I am not following him these days. And I also prefaced it earlier. If I bring up an author or somebody, it's in that isolated instance. So I watched a debate with Jordan Peterson and Sam Altman 5-6 years ago, read his book 5 or 6 years ago. So I hope that alleviates your concerns there. Have you seen Along Came Polly? No, I haven't. Great. The gray tone. I'm seeing what you're seeing. Let me take care of this. 363 English. We don't talk like that here. So please desist. Alex, I'm glad you're here. RK69, hello. Hello from Athens, Greece. I'm glad to see you. Said Elha. Good to see you. Hard to please guy. Hi. I'm glad to see you. It's been a little while. Yvonne, thanks for joining. It's good to see you again. Franzi, thank God. I've only seen a little bit of his stuff recently, and it does seem like there's a lot of shift in that sweet man. A lot of change. DJ, I have tons of journals, and I've also burned a lot as a metaphor of sorts. Oh, my friend, if you're willing, I would love to read what you write, but I would be so interested to see if that could very well be an unlock. Somebody asked me what's the most important, like if you could tell people to do one thing, and I said, right. Like, get it out. And in that we talk about this concept around pouring out the soul. There's something around the unburdening, the letting go, the release, the pouring out of what's within to then create more capacity for greater and even, I think greater, but more complex inputs. If we think of, stick with me on this analogy. So I like to think of the soul as like a cavern. and you kind of like let yourself down with your pickaxe and your shovel and your light, and you're like roping down into the cavern of your soul. Then you're exploring. But so much, it's like very shallow when we first start this exploration of the soul. It's shallow, it's not that deep, and there's a lot of like rocky places. But as we start pickaxing away, one, there's gold to be found and gold to be mined. But then two, we also are actually deepening the cavern of our soul with each exploration of it, and thus we increase the capacity. So now it's not only having a greater depth, but also an actual expansion so that greater sized inputs can come in and fill that space. The complexity, the nuance where it's, we're increasing intelligence, we're increasing capacity in the understanding of the data that's in there, and also the letting go and the release of that data. It's like an expansion downward, but then also release outward, and getting that out of us to then increase capacity. So the exploration, the knowing of the soul, and the release of it are both so necessary in the expansion of the soul. Rappelling down into the abyss. Yes. Tonight we go to war. What is that from? It looks like it's a quote, but I'm just like, yes, I should freaking put that in my book. What's my mindset when writing? DJ, I thought it was from a movie. There you go. You should do it. All right, 363 English. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I'm so glad you joined us. I'm just gonna put you on timeout because I feel like you're a good soul, but maybe not for this show. Or maybe not for now. Maybe you'll come back and be ready to engage in a way that's not like that. I would be so happy. Okay. Y'all, it has been so much fun to be with you tonight. Thank you so much for joining. And it's been really meaningful. I've loved our conversations. I think I'm frozen again. Okay. I think I'm back now. I've loved our conversations. I will be back on tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Y'all, I would love to know if you all are willing and open to, I'd love to have like a little roundtable with a few of you on planning the Noah community and actually plan it with you. So I have a few of you in mind that I'd love to invite to kind of partner with me in this, if you're willing. But if you can shoot me an email, me@ChristeneMarie.com. And Christene, let me actually spell it for you because I know there's been misspellings. me@ChristeneMarie.com. If you guys can email me and let me know, and then I'd actually like to schedule this in the next week or so. The man in the hat, want to build a snowman? That was so funny. So cute. The next week is when I want to have us all get together. And also, I'm starting a 61-day challenge. Honestly, I do it for me, and I just kind of invite people to join. So if you guys want to join that, or if you guys want to get together and talk about the Knowing community and what I have in mind, let me know. Send me an email. me@ChristeneMarie.com. And I wonder, can I like replace? I don't think I can. I hide my name when I'm on here, but I know that my name gets spelled wrong. Christene, Christene. And if you go to the Knowing podcast, you'll see the email link there. So email me. I would love to talk with you, and we'll just do a roundtable probably this weekend if you guys are up for it. And then we're going to start the Knowing challenge, or the 61-day challenge next week. And it's just 61 days of committing to one thing. Again, that's the book, Gary Keller and Dave Papstone. What's one thing that's going to make the greatest impact in your life in whatever category you choose? Intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, physically, professionally, financially. There's a lot of Lees. All right. Going out on a high note. I will see you all tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. Have a wonderful evening. I will see you soon.